Unfortunately, Microsoft has had a little bit of a run of, I would say, bad news, bad luck, maybe a little bit of both. I think that a little bit of both plays kind of a factor in what's going on with Xbox right now. And also the fact that even though I don't like to wear the tinfoil hat, I have to kind of say that it does at times seem like the media is against Xbox, and a lot of the sites and social media in general tends to be against Xbox in a weird sort of way. This is no more prevalent than right now, right? I was there in 2013 when Xbox was getting all the hate. It is just as hateful right now in 2023, 10 years later. And all it took was for the first mediocre game that they've released in the last 3 years. So you can release solidly reviewed games time after time after time after time, and then it's going to get all negated by one mediocre game release, which is utterly ridiculous in my opinion. Utterly ridiculous. With that being said, this couldn't come at a worse time for Microsoft, because I think when you look at what Sony's doing, Sony is 100% relying on the third-party deals that they've made for some of those timed exclusives and whatever. And Microsoft has those type of deals as well. I don't think they have anything maybe on the same level as a Final Fantasy or whatever, but they still have some pretty popular games lined up as a console exclusive for Xbox. And so seeing that go forward or seeing these get delayed is a bit of a bummer. And we saw some of these delays last year affect, like in the terms of Stalker 2, for instance, which is a Xbox console exclusive. So, you know, again, nice to see that Microsoft is doing some nice things here, but at the same time, it's really looking like Microsoft has, this uphill battle to go. You know, Microsoft is committed to doing better, and Microsoft has done better, in my opinion. You could just look at it. I believe I talked about this a little bit the other day. The games that they've released, even though they were technically forced to release multiplats and even in some cases PlayStation exclusives for a year, those games were pretty well received, and even some Game of the Year nominees, and I expect them to get right back on track. They'll fix up Redfall. I think it'll be fine. I don't think that it's a great game by any means, but anyway, this is a weird situation because Ark 2 is a game that is going to be Xbox console exclusive and was just delayed, possibly even delayed till 2025, and yet we're only in 2023. So they say that the 2025 thing isn't a real thing, but I still think this is just more bad news because people are going to tie a console exclusive with, even though it's a third-party game, with Xbox and Game Pass and, say those type of things. So as recently as this year, Studio Wildcard announced an Ark 2 delay to the end of 2024 for the betterment of the final product and the team's well-being. The most recent delay was attributed to the developer's relatively lack of familiarity with Unreal Engine 5. If this latest information from Digital Domain does wind up being indicative of Ark 2's launch plans, it would be the fourth Ark 2 delay since the sequel is announced, and the second in about a month. What could also be happening here is simply that Ark 2 is technically coming out in spring 2025, but it'll arrive in early access in late 2024 as originally planned. That logic would technically check out with official statements from Studio Wildcard and this new report from Digital Domain. Still, that wouldn't explain why it sounds like Studio Wildcard is out of the loop on its own game, and again, it's equally possible this was a typo blown out of proportion and that the game will arrive next year as previously announced. So again, it looks like Ark 2 is going to be facing a delay, and while this isn't a first-party Xbox game, it is, just one of those things that people are going to look at it and go, oh, well, that's typical Xbox, things are delayed, it's so silly to me, the way that people kind of react to this stuff. Right? Like, I just feel like it is. It's like we're past that silliness factor. It's almost as silly as the Xbox One days where we would see, people counting grass on GTA 5 or whatever, or it was that was super silly. I thought that was a joke, right? Like, legitimately, people were arguing that GTA 5 on PS4 had more grass than the Xbox One version, and now is a reason to get the PlayStation version of the game. the utterly ridiculousness of it, right? It sounds ridiculous. So for me, when I see something like that and I go, listen, this is like a strange situation that we're in. Microsoft is getting a lot of hate right now, and I feel like that's extremely unfortunate. But also, I feel like Microsoft is getting unnecessary hate and unwarranted hate, right? Like, they just are. This is like, has nothing to do with Microsoft. This is a third-party deal. This is a Game Pass thing. Game developing is hard. I don't know if any of my listeners out there are developers. Probably not. But it's difficult to do. And it's also difficult to kind of lock down when you're going to actually release a game. So it's always a constant thing moving in flux. And so we continue to see things pop up and crop up, and people just get kind of ticked off and annoyed or whatever. I feel like Microsoft is doing the best that they can, and it just seems like no matter what they do, they will never, ever get the benefit of the doubt. And like I said, you can look at Redfall and hate it all you want, but as far as I'm concerned, this is their first miss in like 3 years' time. Like, whether you like all the other games that they've released, they're not all AAA or whatever, but, Wasteland 3, Ghostwire Tokyo is like at 82 on Xbox, Deathloop is at 89, you have Forza Horizon 5, that's at 92, Halo Infinite is an 87. I get that Halo Infinite isn't in the best state, last year. I think it's actually gotten much better this year, but I get that it wasn't in the best state last year. They didn't have the content ready, but at launch, I felt like, you could play through the campaign. It was a really good soft reboot of the campaign. I thought the multiplayer was fun for what I played with it, but again, like every Halo, like I've never been a huge Halo multiplayer person, so I play some multiplayer, I play the campaign, I move on. It's what I do. I did that with this Halo. I thought it was a good experience. Like, I don't understand. Like, I can understand if you're a Halo aficionado and you live and die the multiplayer. Yeah, you probably weren't happy this past year. But overall, I thought, especially at launch, it was a really good game. They launched Hi-Fi Rush, which I thought was amazing. And I think Redfall is pretty average. But I think possibly in time, people will look at that game and through updates and things like that, and yes, it should have been launched at a better state, no doubt about it, but I think in time people might start to look at that game like they do Sea of Thieves, right? Sea of Thieves was pretty bare bones. I love that game, but other people maybe not so much, right? So I just kind of wanted to point that out, that we're in these different types of situations. This comes at a bad time for sure, but it's not the end all be all. You have to learn from the mistakes and kind of move on and not tie every little thing that happens to Xbox, right? There's some things that are just genuinely beyond the control. And so it's unfortunate when you start to see people kind of look at it in this sort of way and as such a negative anyway, in my humble opinion. So, I think Microsoft still has more work to do, but I also think that they've done a lot of great things and people aren't really giving them the credit that I think is deserved. They get the credit for the bad things, but never any of the credit for the good things. Have you noticed that? Hi-Fi Rush apparently had nothing to do with them, but Redfall has everything to do with them. Like, keep it consistent. If you're going to give them hate, give them the love too, right? It's so nonsense and so biased to do it the other way around. With that being said, I'm Crap Gamer. Please like the video. Let me know what you'd like to see on the channel. Subscribe if you haven't already. Rack 'em up. Crap Gamer out.